Moana Maki.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm happy to stand in support of the second reading of the Royal Society of New Zealand Amendment Bill, and I'm happy to do so both as a member of the Labour caucus and as a member of the Royal Society itself. I want to congratulate my colleague Grant Robertson, the Member of Parliament for Wellington Central, for bringing this important piece of legislation to the House. It's a legislation which marks an involvement in the Royal Society to include the humanities. This is not something which would be universally agreed with throughout the science sector, but it is something, it is an idea whose time has come, I think it's fair to say. I think that the reality of the kind of multidisciplinary approach to research that is undertaken by not only our universities but also our Crown Research Institutes and our private research institutes shows that it's getting more and more difficult to draw a line between those true scientific endeavours and those which enter into the humanities, and I think it makes a lot of sense. This is actually something the Royal Society has been doing in practice for a while, which is to be including and promoting research in the humanities as well as in what would be considered more pure science. And so for that reason it makes sense that this piece of legislation in many respects brings the Royal Society's legislation into line with their actual practice in the current day. There were some questions raised, I understand, at Select Committee, or some concerns from some branches of the Royal Society about the level of consultation. I myself, as a member of the Royal Society, was consulted on this. I received my consultation pack in the mail, my voting papers, and I thought that the information that was provided was appropriate, the information provided was fulsome, and I myself was quite comfortable with that level of consultation that was provided by the Royal Society. And it is particularly important that we continue to support multidisciplinary approaches to research. There are some wonderful examples of this going on around New Zealand. Certainly during the time of the past Labour government, we started funding the Centres of Research Excellence, which were based both in universities but also in CRIs and private research institutes, which really supported the notion of multidisciplinary research, which is what the Royal Society is reflecting here in this legislation, and that means it draws people together around a common focus in research, but from many different areas, and it may involve not just scientists, it might involve economists, it might involve sociologists, it might involve any number of people, lawyers, who can all come together and work on a particular area of scientific research which is crucial for the economy of this country. It's something that Labour very much supported when we were in government, and it makes sense that the Royal Society, who have also been supporting this multidisciplinary approach to research, also bring their own legislation and their own practices into line with that, so that it's not stymied or there aren't any barriers in any way to stop these different areas of the research community from collaborating as much and as fulsomely as they possibly can. And if I look at some of the multidisciplinary research that's going on around the country, really is world class, and I urge members of this House to take note of a lot of the research that's being done, because I think one of the things as parliamentarians that we should be able to do is to say to the people who put us here that we do have regard for the research that is being done, both in New Zealand, particularly in New Zealand, where it's relevant to our own situation, but also research around the world. And sometimes it does concern me, and I know that this came through in some of the submissions, that due consideration is not given to that research. And I think of the multidisciplinary research that's been done at Otago University, which has shown the absolutely important and crucial role that quality early childhood education can play in the long-time achievement of an individual. And it's the first type of research that's been done around the world of this kind, and it has shown very, very clearly that not just any kind of childcare, but in specific quality early childhood education, teacher-led, that those individuals who've gone through that can have far greater outcomes, not just throughout the rest of their education, but the rest of their lives. And That's the kind of multidisciplinary research which needs to be taken into account by members of this House, because we need to be able to say that we have regard to the research. And if parliamentarians choose to ignore research, then that's their prerogative. They are elected to be here, but they should at least have to show regard to it, and they should at least have to be prepared to explain to people why they ignore the overwhelming research in a particular area when making policy decisions. And Labor has always been very supportive of this evidence-based approach to policy, and it's something that I know the Royal Society has also been particularly supportive of in their work, because scientists and researchers across the board don't carry out this research for fun. They don't do it just for the hell of it. They do it because they want to contribute to the information that is out there, contribute to the decision-making processes, contribute to good quality policy decisions and policy-making processes. And we've heard a lot of fine words in this debate, and I welcome the comments from all members in this debate on this particular piece of legislation, but it has to go further than just voting in favour of the Royal Society of New Zealand Amendment Bill. It has to go much further than that. It has to go much further, and we have to be able to say as a Parliament that not only do we support the work the Royal Society does, not only do we support its move to include humanities, its move to support more multidisciplinary approaches to research, but that we are going to take regard of that research when it is completed, that we are not going to ignore it, and if we believe the research is wrong, then we will challenge it, but we will give reasons why we are challenging it and why we don't believe that the research should be given due regard. And I can think of the other example of boot camps being another example where all the research told us they wouldn't work. All the research said they actually had worse outcomes, not better. They created fitter, faster criminals. All the research about that was very clear. And yet a policy was put in place that disregarded the research. Well, a government runs on a policy platform, and they have every right they have a mandate to bring into place policies, but they should have to explain to the public why they are ignoring every single piece of evidence that's out there, and why they think the evidence is wrong and they are right, because this is taxpayers' money that's being spent, a lot of taxpayers' money, and the taxpayers of New Zealand deserve to know that their money is being well spent, that the research is not being ignored, that the evidence is being listened to before money goes towards pet projects that frankly are doomed for failure before they even start, and we flush $20 million worth of taxpayers' money down the drain. And I hope that the fine
Point
words
of order,
heard,
Louise Upson.
Mr Speaker, I'm just drawing your attention to see if this is going beyond the scope of the bill, the Royal Society of New Zealand Amendment Bill.
Well, I'm waiting for the amendment to make it relevant.
Mr Speaker? You may or may not be aware that the previous Speaker prior to dinner actually gave an explicit instruction to all members that after, how could I put it, a slight digression by myself and Mr Shearer, and he felt that kind of closed that issue off, that all other speakers were essentially to speak to the bill. He felt that Mr Shearer and myself had had an appropriate and adequate debate, but that probably should be confined to the two speakers that I've just referred to.
Well, I wasn't aware of that, and I have frequently told the House that of all the debates, the second reading debate is pretty much the tightest one that's there. So if members want to make analogies or make comparative, that's appropriate, but it must be linked to the material pertaining to the second reading. Moana Maki.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I apologise to members of the National Party. I thought the Royal Society of New Zealand was about research, but apparently not. That's all right. If it makes them uncomfortable, then I will speak about something else. Mr Speaker, one of the key achievements, as I said, of the past Labor government was the multidisciplinary approach that is being taken up in this piece of legislation. And as I also said before, there was some disquiet at first around the inclusion of humanities into this role. And the reason that I was discussing some of the areas that humanities go into is to show that crossover, is to show why it's important that this change in the Royal Society be supported, and to show and to actually to brag a little bit about the fantastic research that's going on out there. And I'm very disappointed that National Party members are so uncomfortable about that they feel the need to shut me down about, well, they want to talk about the bill because they don't want to talk about their appalling record in this area, but that's fine, Miss Upston. We can move on. And sorry, what's that, Dr Matt? The limited service volunteers are extremely popular and well proven. Oh, the boot camps. Right, well, see, I mean, the Minister himself wants to inject on me about boot camps, but that's fine. Well, limited service volunteers is the nice word you've come up, but it's boot camps. That's what you called it during the election campaign. That's what you called it during the election campaign. That's what you called it during the election campaign, and now you've realised that it doesn't sound good, so you want to move away from it. Fact is, it doesn't matter what you call it, it doesn't work, and the research shows that. The Royal Society themselves have often taken pains to show how important it is that governments follow an evidence-based approach to policy. What is it about evidence-based approach to policy that terrifies the National Party so much? That terrifies them so much? All they're asking, all the Royal Society has been asking for the longest time is look at the evidence, and then see what it says, because that's the best example of how things are going to go in the future, is how they've worked when we've done them before. And they didn't work before. The research shows that, the evidence shows that. The Royal Society have consistently asked...
It's just a point of order. Honourable Wayne Knapp.
For the last... Yes, I know I had some interjections, but I then did stop with interjections, and it's just continued and continued and continued with no reference whatsoever to the bill.
I think the member's got to take some responsibility for what happened. And Marina Mackie, you've got 30 seconds left. Talk to us about the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a very good piece of legislation. As I said, as a member of the Royal Society, I was completely happy with the consultation that was undertaken, with the ability given by members of the Royal Society to participate in that consultation. I know there were concerns raised at Select Committee about that. That's why I want to mention it. This is a step change, as the government is so fond of saying, for the Royal Society. It brings the humanities in. It is a welcome change, and I look forward to the committee stage debates of this bill, where I might be allowed to talk about things without the National Party getting so upset.
Louise Upston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very proud to